U.S. election. Who's paying attention in any capacity?
No, not really.
Not at
In
all.
The
any
extent of
capacity.
my
Do
paying
you know who's
attention,
running for president?
yes,
Who's running for-
I read headlines.
Do I care? No, I don't.
So
Well, the worst part is we probably should care because if
If-
Trump gets in, it could potentially be bad for us here in Canada.
it depends who the prime minister is.
Well,
If Trudeau's still the prime minister when Trump is in office, there's going to be some back and forth, sort of like when he canceled NATO, or not NATO, sorry, NAFTA, and that created a little bit of stuff. But if Kamala Harris is in, she spent time in Canada, and she apparently has a soft spot, air quotes, so that could be good for us. But then,
yeah,
but if
that's
she gets
something
in,
that she'll say just to win, because there's a lot of U.S. citizens in Canada that can
expats,
vote,
yeah,
Well,
right?
hopefully
And
she gets.
those votes can count or something.
Trump's not ideal.
I'm of the Jim Jeffries club at the moment of just let's just see how crazy shit can get kind of thing. But
The
it's
part that gets me is just how. How do I say this without pissing off a lot of people? How uh, driven by celebrity influence it seems that the U.S. political race is. Like, you've got one side. I mean, Donald Trump himself has had a career of being on TV, all the shows. He's always, for the most part, always been, we'll say, the center of attention in one form or another.
Mm.
But now, just the other day, they had the rally for Kamala?
the Democratic National Convention, I think, is what
Yes,
you're referring
that
to.
would be it.
And I think it's over 3 or 4 days.
Okay, well, whatever. I'm not claiming to ever be paying attention a lot, but they had same thing. They had celebrities on there giving their piece, and it seemed like it was more about the entertainment value
Oh yeah,
than it is the actual political
It's-
side of it. When you have a case where the outcome of these two individuals, which is why it's always only two individuals, I'll never understand. But I'm Canadian, I'm not American, so
well, it's funny you bring that up because
I don't get it. There's always only two.
there was a
There
very
can be only
successful
one, right? It's like Highlander.
there was a very successful third party candidate, Robert Kennedy Jr., who was on the ballot, and he was talking before
Yeah, but he bowed out. Huh?
well he there was an audio call leaked a couple of weeks ago where I think by his son, where he's talking to Trump and he's trying to see if he can get Trump wants his endorsement because Kennedy is an anti-vaxxer, so he was stealing some votes from the Republicans, and Trump wanted him to get the hell out of there so he could get, but it's only 4 or 5%, but 4 or 5% in certain districts that wins an election. Because Biden only won by 10,000 votes in some of these states, and that decided. I mean, 10,000 people out of a state of 7 or 8 million. That's nothing, but that's how margin. Anyway, so Robert Kennedy bowed out today of certain states. He's still on the ballot in a couple of other states, but all the states that were important for Trump to win, he's taken his name off the ballot, and he has endorsed Trump tonight. But
Which is unfortunate because I think that Donald Trump is too fire from the hip. And I think that he will just say things or do things or enact policies because that's in the moment what suits his fancy. And I think that's the scary part.
But there's also a lot of him where it's he'll take
showmanship too. That's the other problem.
Right? He's all about talking points, and he'll try different talking points at certain rallies. And so I remember when he was first running back in 2015, 2016, one of the first things he said at his press conference was about the Mexican killers and rapists, and that polled really well. A lot of Americans agreed with that.
That's the part that gets me, is just how I don't understand how there's so many people that will just hang on every word he says. I'm obviously not a Trump fan because I think he's too much of a loose cannon from the outside view. Whether that's just the impression you get from what you see, or if he's actually like that, I can't say.
He's all about giving. His biggest accomplishment, again air quotes, was a huge tax cut that he gave in the states.
It wasn't the wall.
The wall never happened.
I know.
But the tax cut that he gave, he was able to convince average Americans that it was going to help them in some capacity, but it helped billionaires and millionaires
Well, sure,
and did
because
nothing.
those are the people that he wants to rub elbows with, right?
But it's that number of people is so few that that voting block really means nothing.
The-
He wants is sponsorship money. He
yeah,
wants donors.
yeah.
But they were able to convince the average American that you're going to be paying less tax. Like the $1,000 a year that you and a family of five is going to save is somehow going to improve your life. And some economists sat down and said, you're looking at like an extra two pizzas a month kind of thing after with taxes. So it's not any kind of savings. But people,
Well, not when you consider the average person is going to receive that money and then likely spend it on necessities,
yeah,
right? Instead of being able to take that money and just throw it into a, I don't know what the terminology is in the US, but into a high interest savings account
yeah,
or invest it or something like that.
or or even
Most
just
aren't going to do that.
take some of that money and put it on an open car loan just to get your payments down.
Yeah.
Anything like that. Yeah, it's but the people that Trump has voting for him are people who really believe that he's going to drain this mythical swamp. Whereas in reality, the first thing he does is he makes the former CEO of ExxonMobil Secretary of State, which is sort of like Vader clean up the galaxy and hiring Boba Fett as
Well,
his
let's
right hand
face
man.
it, that individual probably isn't doing a whole lot at ExxonMobil. He's got lots of free time.
He didn't last.
So,
Yeah, what was his name? Rex Tillerson or something like that. He didn't last very long in the role because he got in, I think, and I think John Bolton, I think it was who wrote the book. Anyway, he gets in and he realizes that there's a lot to this, and this job is very important, and Trump doesn't have any idea what this entails. I can't work for this man, and that's how most of his people have bowed out. And
I don't know.
at the Democratic convention, they had former Trump staffers come in and show tweets of actual conversations, apparently, with Trump, and just how ridiculously unhinged it was.
But that's the thing that worries me because people still listen to what he says and take it as gospel, or at least it seems that way anyway. When in numerous cases, he's gone and said something or a string of somethings, and then fact finders are like, well, this is false, that's false, that's false. Oh, wait, everything that he said is false.
But his audience are people who don't trust the media to begin with, and they just assume that the fact
Yeah,
checkers
he's
are wrong.
playing on their, what, I'm going to say almost paranoia, maybe?
There's a bit of
Or,
paranoia, there's conspiracy theory, there's gullibility, and a lot of them are religious. And as soon as you put religious people who are already gullible, who love conspiracy theories, and you tell them that CNN is fake news, which in a lot of
oh,
cases they're
fake
not perfect,
news.
but
Sure, there's lots of fake news out there, but
you know.
I'm
Ryan, get in on
tired of
this. What do
hearing
you think?
that fake news.
I would agree with the late great George Carlin. Everything's already been bought and paid for. You have the illusion of choice. The same in Canada to a certain extent.
I would say that
Oh, I would agree with you.
I
It's
would say it's wrong from a certain from a certain perspective, where when you see how close it came last time and how many people, again, 10,000 votes in a city of several million people is nothing. It's 100 from here, 100 from there, 1,000 from there, and how close it actually came. That's when I don't think that it's. I mean, it seems preordained as to who you're going to vote for. Like, I would never have guessed that Trump would have won the Republican nomination in 2015, 2016, because he was such a loose cannon. But all he did was
I think it
zingers and
still is. I can't imagine it's improved.
and he's old. There should be a cap on.
They always
Yeah,
are, though. They're always 70 to 80
But
year old.
Obama wasn't. Obama was in his 40s. Obama and Kennedy. But you're right. Most of them were older guys. But there should be, if mandatory retirement age in a country is 65, there's your retirement age for presidents. They shouldn't be any older than that, because as soon as you get to that age, you develop biases
well,
that you will continue with for the
oh,
rest of your
long
life.
ingrained too.
Yeah,
Like
and
when you get to that age, you're talking about those
Well,
points of views have been established 50 years ago
you
yeah,
can
or
see
more.
it at our age.
Yeah,
We have a certain set of views that the
because
younger
there's
generation won't
there's
have.
been plenty of times where I've said something and I'm like,
We're not close to
that's
70 just yet.
well, no, but even now, I know that I have a certain point of view or a certain perspective on certain subjects that has a lot to do with just how we were brought up. right?
But something could be said for
Doesn't necessarily mean it's
yeah.
right.
Well, something could be said for life experience as well, as even if it's not right, having the I forget who it was who said it, but basically, the president is or prime minister is a figurehead. It's who they surround themselves with that you have to pay attention to, which is why Trump surrounds himself with people who were really just interested in money and banks and taking, taking, taking.
Yeah.
Harris, I don't know yet. Like her vice presidential pick is one of these guys who, you know, sort of likes gender affirmation things, and just separate issue. But
Well, it's a hot topic and it's a hot potato at that because there's a lot of people that are all for getting their face into that uh, battleground, and then others that would rather just ignore it, push
and
it go away.
yeah, and
Uh,
saying a blanket thing of we should treat everyone with respect. That's that no longer floats. You have to specify.
well, and that's the problem
Yeah.
because it's the specificity that is causing all of the unrest.
Well, and
When if you simply were just to be respectful to others,
so
end quote, right?
so
Then
Obama's speech at the DNC, they was talking about how, because Obama's sort of like a moderate, they call them neocons, like new conservative sort of people. He went on and said that basically that we need every vote we can get, and you can't put down people just because you disagree with them on an issue. You have to be open to what they're saying, and let's try and convince them that our way is a better way, as opposed to saying that you're a fascist, you're a Nazi.
which is the whole
Come
point
on
of an
over here and
actual
let me,
debate,
yeah,
right?
sort of like,
Not
yeah.
name calling and insults because that's what you get in debates now, apparently.
Trump
Um,
debates, yeah,
Yes.
and that's coming to Canada hardcore. Like
well, because
all
he's
the
tried to railroad his opponent, is what he does. Back them into a corner by attacking all the time. You see it, right?
mhm.
That's, and I mean, Joe Biden, from what limited view I see, just fell victim to that. Whether he was just unprepared, I don't know. I can't say. I'm not an expert, but um, it seemed like he just wasn't prepared to play that game,
And it's age too, right?
and
Yeah,
it's age,
yeah.
and
But one of Trump's things is the fact that he's been surrounded by yes men for so long who
yeah,
will not talk back. And I think Kamala Harris is not going to. He's going to destroy her in a debate unless it's about policy. If the organizers of the debate can make it only about policy and not about fluff, she'll do great. If she has to react in real time on live television with his shenanigans,
probably the best
not going to be good.
tactic would be to not react. Period, because a lot of that crap that he likes to sling at his opponents is just that.
Yeah, there's
It's
there's no
crap.
yeah.
There's no substance to it, and all it's there is to just it's an attempt to disarm and put his debate opponent, if you can call it a debate, on the back foot because they're in the defensive, and the tactic would be to not fall for that, you know,
Well,
and
that's Trump's
not even
whole
address
shtick,
it.
right? That's his
Yeah,
whole is to
which
try
is
to rile
ridiculous
people up.
in my opinion because this is supposed to be a professional um, institution, for lack of a better term, I guess.
But see, that's why people love him. People love
I
him.
know,
People
and
love him
that's the
because
scary part
he's
because
he's
it's
going to change things.
But he doesn't,
He
and he
doesn't.
won't
no,
unless you're a buddy of his.
Yeah,
because
because it's
he's
cash.
playing up the American
Oh yeah, yeah.
population. He is 100% playing them.
Which is very similar to what Doug Ford did in
It is,
Ontario.
and we're
And
we're just as guilty, and Trudeau
sorry,
as well.
Continues to do.
yeah, and I think that. But her, give me one more point, and then we'll get off this topic. Because I know Ryan just
We may
loves it.
never get off
But
of it.
the best thing she can do in a debate is a lot of eye rolling. Every time he goes off on a tangent, get her on camera because
Yeah,
the
the
big
look
thing.
of disdain
Well,
or something like
or
that.
just oh please, because right
Yeah,
now what their big talking point is, these guys are like they're Democrats against the Republicans, and aren't these guys weird? Like their ideas are just weird, and that's real for some reason that's really
well,
taking hold.
they need to also get the they need to make it seem like Trump's just wasting their time because
Exactly. Yeah.
ultimately that is what he's doing.
Yeah.
He's wasting their time by just filling the airwaves with whatever rhetoric he can come up with.
They need her
And
on camera, looking as if
almost like they're bored.
Yeah, this like,
Like,
oh, like this again. This is ridiculous. Why are we talking about this? Like, move on.
yeah, and don't engage. Not really, because that's what then makes you look like you're on the defensive.
Because if I could give her one piece of advice, it would be when he's rambling, would be to somehow interrupt him and say, "Is there a skip button?"
Yeah,
Yeah, because he makes no valid points.
No
no,
valid
He
points,
attacks the candidate. That's all
and
he.
she has to play to the demographic of voters she needs, and just where's your skip button? Is there a skip button I can press to skip through this bullshit? But yeah,
Be
but
nice if she came in and said exactly.
that would endear voters, and that if I could give Trudeau some advice up here when he's debating Polyev, instead of talking, oh, they're being mean, we don't do that. No, you do it, and you do it hard, and you
you know what
insinuate.
I'd like to hear from Justin Trudeau? Less,
He's
uh,
not a good
um.
speaker, but again, it
Oh,
comes
it's so frustrating to listen to, though.
but again, it comes down to like what I said earlier. It's not for me. He's running the country, but he's not, because it's all about who's around him,
Yeah,
who's giving advice, and I think the people who would give Kamala Harris advice would probably be better than Trump. Same type of person, but they know that when you
well,
like
because
Obama's
Trump
first,
likes yes men, right?
but like
So
Obama's first term, when he
they're
got
not
his
great
when he got
advisors.
Obamacare through, Harris needs a win like that in the first 2 years of her term if she gets in, to really solidify herself as a legacy. Trump has no legacy other than craziness. He didn't do anything, nothing. And I think that up here, Trudeau, he
The
needs to
fact that
fight
he's
back.
even running for president boggles my mind.
He's running for president solely to keep himself out of prison,
Yeah.
and the only other thing I'd probably say as a caveat to that is he thinks he won the last time.
Oh, he's convinced. He had convinced himself that he had won before the race was even
Right.
over. You know, and no one can tell him otherwise.
I was speaking with my sister that night, and when he came out at about, the polls have been closed for maybe an hour, he came out and said, all the we're way ahead in all these states, this is great, when in reality the polls hadn't closed in most of the country, and saying that, oh, we're way ahead, but you watch, they're going to try and say they won. And as soon as that happened, I said to my sister, this is going to get really, really scary.
You know what Trump reminds me of sometimes with the kind of shit he says? He reminds me of Jeremy Clarkson in some cases
uh,
because, but the difference being, I think Jeremy Clarkson knows he's full of shit, right? When he
oh
says
yeah,
some of that stuff, he knows, and he's doing it on purpose because everybody knows that he knows he's full of shit.
and
On
it's a
the other
role,
side,
it's a
though,
role he's playing
he
too, right?
believes it. Trump believes it.
Yeah,
I think. At least that's the impression I get, even though it's BS.
I think he
But it's the same kind of like, I invented the moon, like something absolutely ridiculous. You hear something from like Jeremy Clarkson like that,
mhm.
yeah, he's said it all through his career, right? But
but
he knows that that's false,
But a
and
lot of and it's the tone, right? I mean, it's
yeah.
a lot. 90% of what Clarkson says is comedic in nature, and people just say, "I can't believe he said that." But in reality,
But you know what I mean, right?
yeah,
It's the ridiculous,
yeah,
obviously false statements,
yeah.
but he's doing it in a comedic way, whereas Trump will say the same kind of thing, but be dead serious, even though it's not a lick of truth.
Startling.
And the question is, does he even know whether it's false or not?
I think when you get to that age, well,
Probably not.
I'll give you an example slightly. So last night, I conned my grandfather into going. He's 90. He's turning 96, and he went. There was a discussion about a paper mill that my great great grandfather had bought and ran for years. And
Anyway,
so
we're
he's
not we're not providing addresses, right, during this
no,
kind of thing. No, good,
no.
because I don't need a whole bunch of
Oh,
They
don't worry, the net will find
the he's up there, and
AI will identify my voice or
he's
something.
talking to this other 90, 92 or 93-year-old man. They're having, because they've known each other for 90 years. They're talking. They're having, like, a great little time. And my grandma keeps saying, "Oh, I don't know. That must have been, oh geez, 50 years ago." And my sister leans over and says, "I think he means like 75 years ago. It wasn't 50 years ago, because he's 90. He's saying this stuff happened when he was a teenager. That's 70 years, right?"
The years blend together as you get older,
And
right?
that's the thing with Trump, is the fact that I think he still thinks that he's a 40-year-old man, and I think that he thinks he can act like that because he eats like that. His diet is horrendous, and he's really overweight. He's not in any good shape. His doctor must get a lot of kickbacks. So you just tell him I'm fine. right? So like the cognitive test that he took, where he was proud that he was, I forget what it was, he was able to identify a bunch of animals, and he said that how great his cognitive skills were. It's like, that's the same that a
Uh-huh.
4-year-old gets,
Yeah.
right?
I mean,
But
I guess if I am qualified to provide that kind of answer and somebody's waving several $100,000 under my nose just to say, yeah,
well, and
sure, most people are going to take that money because there's not a lot of people that are independently wealthy.
Well, as soon as you disagree with him, he turfs
Yeah.
you.
and
So
and
what are you
and
going to do?
Well, this is a guy that's convinced himself for ages that he's always right.
and that's
And,
what's one of the good things about
that's
Canadian
another
politics.
scary part.
In Canadian politics, if Trudeau tried to start pulling stuff like what Trump does, there would be enough liberals who would say, because it's a minority government, who said, I don't really like where this is going, and then they can do a vote of non-confidence and kick him out. You
If
can't
if
do that in the
if
States.
if I found a politician, whether it be Canadian or American, I mean in this case, preferably Canadian because that's where I live, that would come out and honestly say, "Yeah, I screwed up. This is on me. I made a mistake," and owned it, instant vote. I wouldn't care what the mistake was. The fact that you admitted that you screwed up and owned it instead of deflected and played blame or fired somebody who may or may not have actually been the guilty party, because that happens all the time, I would be
Um,
far more inclined to vote to somebody that's going to admit their faults and errors instead of somebody that's trying to constantly convince the public that either it wasn't their fault or it was somebody else's fault
but
or
wouldn't that
downplay whose fault it was.
but wouldn't that greatly depend on what they did next? Like you can admit, let's say Trudeau decided to build a bridge out of wood, and in reality it needed something, and he was told by experts that no, wood is not the material, and then he admitted his fault, he admitted he was wrong, and they're going to do it. But then a month later he did something similar. That's
So, yeah, but here's the thing, right? Even now, they're teaching kids in school that you learn by making mistakes. And even though you're the leader of a country in the Western world, we'll say we're going to ignore the rest of the globe for now, but in the Western world, they generally will tell students these days that making mistakes is good. You learn from making mistakes. That mindset does not stop once you become an adult, once you become a CEO, once you become a um, president or prime minister.
Mhm.
You're still going to be able to make mistakes. You're still human. It's your ability to admit that you've made a mistake and then learn from it that's important.
the learning,
And the people
and
that
that's what I mean.
can't admit that they've made fault, those are the ones that I worry about.
I would agree. What I've learned in my 45 years is the ones that make mistakes and admit that they've done it will be left behind by the liars that I said to the top.
Well,
Everywhere I've ever worked,
and you
which
may
is
very
unfortunate.
well be right, which is not correct. However, you can't make it better by joining them.
No, you can't.
So
But
the only way that
in my next 40 years, I'm going to give it a go.
well,
I
admitting
hope
fault,
I hope in 40 years we're sitting here talking about this.
like
Well, Ryan, did it work?
I'm a firm believer that if you can admit fault,
Well, I agree 100% with you.
right, you are a more respectable individual than somebody that is constantly trying to shift blame or deflect or mask fault of their own.
So say the person comes out and admits that what they did that was wrong, and they apologize for it, but it was a situation where
We're
they've
not
been
talking criminal. I'm not talking criminal fault here.
just talking like a
Like I don't. I'm not looking to get into that legal battle, which of course I'm also not qualified to really comment on. But I'm just talking about things like I made a decision and that decision was not the best decision because
so
of
policy type
this,
of
right?
things, or for
Well,
political.
yes, for if we're going to talk about politics,
Or
then sure,
so you're just speaking in a general.
correct,
Okay.
because situations are always gray, and yeah, you can't be a murderer and then all of a sudden get forgiven and respected because you've admitted to being a murderer. That's not what I'm saying, obviously.
You realize you're going against 2,000 years of Christian ethos here with that statement.
I don't give a shit.
You can't be forgiven and
But
just
you know what I mean? Like
Says the
something
atheist.
that's not.
yeah. Okay. And slightly on topic on that, I forget who it was that I was reading, but it was a comment about the guy said even God in the Bible admits that there are other gods to worship. And the person said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Recite the Ten Commandments." I forget what order they're in, but there's the one where it says, "I'm the Lord thy God. Thou will have no other gods above me." And the guy says, right there, he's telling you that there are other gods out there and you shouldn't worship them because he's the best. And the person just stares blankly at, I think it was like one of those street interactions. And the person just stares at them and says, "That's not what that means." So what do you interpret that means? Oh, just he's the only God. But he says that no other gods are better than him. So he's admitting the sense that there are gods
Yeah.
to worship and not to worship them and to worship him. And the person's just staring at them and says, I got to think about this. So anyway, on the Christian topic of that's what's floating around in my head. I've been waiting just to tell somebody about it. But anyway,
Problem with being a politician is you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Well, yeah,
You're
and
never
I
going to please everybody with your decisions.
and that is because there are too many people out there that are
So
your adversary.
you're saying eliminate your adversaries. Got it.
Yeah,
got it.
that's right.
Listeners at home,
That's right. Ultimately, that
That's
all
what Mark
boils
Thompson
down to eliminating your adversaries. Yeah, I
should,
think we got that down
shouldn't
right.
use your last name. Edit that out.
um, but but
When he
it's
takes power, he's going to eliminate his enemy.
and it also
No,
you know
that's
it
not what I
depends
mean.
on what you consider as an enemy, right? One thing that we have too much of in politics right now is enemies. Where when we were growing up in the 80s and even early 90s, the politicians would not sling mud at each other all the
Yeah.
time. It was
Well, I mean,
it was more of his policy is bad. This policy that we have is
Very much
much
so,
better,
yeah.
and here's
as
why,
opposed to he's
right?
bad, I'm
Because
not him, vote for me, which is what Polyev is all based around. I'm not Trudeau, Trudeau bad. Fuck Trudeau, I good.
There is a lot of slinging. Well, more from Polyev to Trudeau than the other
Yeah,
way
and
around.
it's
because it's all about image now,
Well, Twitter didn't
and we see,
exist.
and that's what we see in the
Sorry,
U.S.
X didn't exist when we were
Yeah.
young.
the meme is has been the best thing for jokes and the worst thing for politics,
Yeah.
because now you can people who will not even, they don't even know what they're sharing, and it's Jagmeet Singh said this. Do you disagree? Share if you disagree. Well, there's no context.
No,
Sure, he might have said that, maybe, but after that, it could have been a 10-minute apology.
Yeah.
and most people won't go diving for context
No.
either. They see that 4 second or 5 second clip and immediately react.
Well, and that's social media, and it's also it's so prevalent. It's terrible. What was I? I was scrolling just because I was bored the other day, and I came across one of these posts, which because I'm in Canada, it doesn't give us news on Facebook.
Best thing that ever happened in Canada,
It
mind you.
probably, well, maybe, maybe not, and here's why. Because the stuff that we do see, right, is fiction made to look like news reports.
But the problem is that you have companies like Post Media and who own the way, like local newspapers. They own all kinds of radio stations and whatnot. I think it's
Yeah,
supposed to be, but so most of their content of news is opinion pieces disguised as news, where it's not fact based. It's Trudeau is
right.
ruining the country and
Yeah,
here's why. That's not news, but people reading it and seeing it online thought it was news.
right. And that's the problem because there's a lot of people that won't stop to look and really think about what they've just read,
Mm.
right? And there might be lots of people out there. I know Facebook is a dying breed, it seems, but nothing necessarily wrong with that either. But
I will salute as the ship goes down.
there's so many people that don't stop to think that maybe this is fake, right?
Yeah.
You got to consider the fact that everything you see is fake, but you also have to consider the fact that it may not be fake. So somewhere in the middle is the truth, usually. But anyway, this post I saw was I don't know who the individual was. I can't remember the name. I assume she's a music celebrity, perhaps, but this woman had made a comment about Taylor Swift in that if you weren't a fan of Taylor Swift, it meant you're a misogynist.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that. Yeah.
Okay, so
No,
that was
dislike her music
well, see, that's just it.
because she's a misandrist.
Well, whichever the
Every
case,
song is about bashing her past ex.
whether you like her music or not, or her as an individual or not, the fact that somebody makes the correlation between not liking Taylor Swift and misogyny is ridiculous. I'm not a Taylor Swift fan.
But
And there's nothing wrong with misogyny.
there's a whole other
And down goes the spiral.
but there's a whole other angle to this story though
Oh, I'm sure
about,
there is, but you start looking at the comments, right?
well, and
And that's what it's for.
but the co- but that
It's
but
that
the
engagement.
but the misogynistic comment is accurate in some capacity when you're dealing with, so her couple of her
Come on,
concerts were
don't ruin my point.
a couple of her concerts were canceled in Europe over Islamic threats of bombs. Those people, the people making those bombs and making those threats, are the worst kind of misogynist because they want her to shut up because she's a woman.
And I'm not disagreeing with you, but
And that's,
that's an
I'm just saying that,
extreme, right?
yeah, I mean, but that's the only case in which the comment that whoever that was made works.
Well, and
Everything
if
else
and
is
if that
just,
was the context
yeah,
of the conversation or interaction, then I could understand the
because I
reason to say it, but of course that's not what you see.
no,
And
and
then there was 6,000 comments at the time and climbing,
Well,
and
now
it's
there is no gray area now. It's either you're for it
or
or you're
against,
against me.
good or bad, no gray. Yeah, you're
There's
right.
no. I
and
have no opinion. It's okay not to have an
yeah,
And I
opinion.
almost commented when I saw this on this post along the lines that, all of these commenters are just fueling the fire. It doesn't, the poster, whoever it was, if it was true or not, made up or not, all they're looking for is those likes, the engagement, the comments on that post. And that perpetuates it,
you should do some,
regardless of whether
if
somebody commented and just said, yep,
if you think that's
or
bad,
no.
do
Doesn't
do
matter how
some
many words.
do some reading on the AI and Twitter and Instagram
Oh, it's,
bots.
yeah, I bet it's bad.
And the bots are just,
Yeah.
the AI bots will see that kind, and they'll have two separate accounts. One will give a post in favor of the point, and one will give a post against the point, and then that it just
Yep.
spirals out of
And you
control.
can never know which are actual people posting anymore.
Well, that's
Yeah.
probably most of the interaction
It's probably
in the
safe to
comments
assume
is bots.
Oh, huge. with with AI, it's going to get 100 times worse
I don't
before it gets
know
better.
if they're sophisticated enough to record how long the user pauses on a, say, a Facebook post in their
Yes.
feed.
Yep.
So if
Definitely.
you're scrolling along and you see something and you stop,
Yeah.
you haven't clicked it, you
Definitely.
just stopped.
Yep. Definitely.
You think they're able to record
Oh
how
yeah,
long?
and then
100%.
you'll see more of that in your feed.
Yeah, I think I've noticed that from time to time. So
It's
you
like not
probably,
having
And
your phone mic on,
well, you
and
know how they do
everything
it.
we're talking about right now. As soon as you start scrolling through your feed, you'll see.
well,
Well, you'll see Taylor
I was
Swift come
able to
up.
prove that because I went to Facebook settings and took its permissions away from my microphone, and that instantly stopped.
Well, as for your scrolling, for your
So
pausing
turn it
point,
back on.
on the screen, how they do that mainly is from smartphones. They're tracking on,
Just the
they
finger
have
movement.
what they call heat maps,
Yeah.
and where you stop, it shows because of your swipe. Okay, that person paused there for 5 seconds. That content, we're going to give them that until they die, and then that's
It's so
constant.
ridiculous, and you can't actually not
But it's
see
brilliant.
something.
But it is brilliant from a marketing perspective. It's brilliant. If,
Mm.
for example, even after I bought my Rivendell Lego set, every time I would scroll, I would stop and I would read the comments because I wanted to know how other people had used lights to light them and stuff like that. And then I had that even after I purchased it. I was still getting ads to buy it on Amazon for a week or so afterwards, even
Yeah.
after I bought it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not spending that much money again on the same Lego set as much as I'd probably love to.
Well, and it's funny too because you don't even have to. All it takes is one interaction,
Mhm.
and you're doomed to see the similar stuff over and over again.
Oh yeah.
It's so bizarre because I might have clicked on a
You can say it, Taylor Swift. You know.
I
I
am not a misogynist.
I could have potentially clicked on a Taylor Swift related post, we'll say, um, once in my life, and yet it's going to repopulate on my feed over and over again, and I can't go and hide it. I can't. I can pause it for 30 days, and then it's just gonna refeed to my scrolling,
But so,
which
sometimes,
is why I
sometimes when you're
really wish
scrolling,
I don't have
if you
social media. Actually,
sometimes when you're scrolling, if you press in the wrong area, it will subscribe you to that feed. It doesn't pop up with
I
any
know
icon.
I've done that by error before and liked things that I didn't mean to like because I happened to
Yeah.
just quickly touch it, and I'm like, too late now. I can
Yeah,
unlike it, but its damage is done.
yeah, they know,
Yeah,
they know.
whether it was an accident or not.
I wonder how many marriages and relationships are ended like that because let's say somebody goes through and they see that, oh, so and so liked this page. You did? Why did you like that page? I didn't like that page. Well, it says so right here. It must happen.
It probably does happen, but there's another instance of people just going to the extreme and not believing an individual that says it was an accident. It was just scrolling. I clicked it, whatever. I unclicked it. You
I was
know,
balancing my
it
phone above
means
my head while
nothing,
lying
but
in
it's
bed and
too
happened
late
to
at
press.
that point because the other person involved has been spinning that in their head for the last half a day or whatever.
Mm.
That's all that they've thought about, especially when couples are concerned, I suppose.
So the Acolyte was canceled. Your thoughts, Ryan?
Canceled is a good word.
Canceled. I agree.
Have did you watch it?
Never watched it. No.
So I had this conversation.
Many clips I have watched, and the
I,
writing is bad.
I
It's
watched every
just
episode.
Yeah, so I didn't watch it either, and one of my coworkers recently had sat down with his wife, and they've watched it, and he enjoyed it. Um,
If you're a casual Star Wars fan and
doesn't
you're not
sound
in,
like he's a casual Star Wars fan though.
is he a hardcore Star Wars fan?
I don't
it's
know. He
probably
is probably a good 15 years or more younger than I am, so
that's probably why he enjoyed it.
that's
So,
probably
so
He
why.
didn't grow up
late
with
70s.
the original three
Yeah,
and then
because
watch
I started to talk
Disney
about that. Yeah,
destroy
And I
everything.
and I've made that point is that you like in high school, like some people will say, "Oh, I'm a fan." It's like, yeah, you ever been bullied for liking Star Wars? No, why would that happen? It's like, I was in high school, I was in public school, I was bullied for liking Star Wars. Like I, metaphorically, I bled for Star Wars.
It's like
I
D&D.
bought the books, I bought the figures, I
Yeah,
bought the statues,
yeah.
and then to see that crumble down. I mean, some people say that, you're not invested. It's not your money they're putting in. The studio can do what they want. Sort of, but the only reason Star Wars exists now is because people like me shelled out probably tens of thousands of dollars over 40 years into Star Wars stuff. It exists because people like me kept it alive. Same thing with comic book movies. Comic books were dead in the early 2000s. In the late 90s, Marvel was bankrupt. The sales were abysmal, but it was folks like myself who, in some small capacity, with the millions of us, we kept that going. Blade, I mean, we
yeah.
going to see the early X-Men movies, but comic book movies weren't popular in the mid 2000s. They didn't
I
exist.
went and saw X-Men 4 times.
You and I remember you and I went when we went. I got back from work one day on the train, and we went. It was the opening of the theater. I remember that, and that was awesome. But I guess my point is that the people now saying that, oh, I'm a Star Wars fan. I watched The Acolyte. Okay, well, no, you're not.
Then
You're a
yeah,
casual fan who happened to like the material. You're not a Star Wars fan.
it
Like
has
you didn't have
catered
arguments
really.
with your
It has catered really well to people that have decided to jump on the bandwagon. That's for sure. Um,
the bad press helped because people would say, I want to, it can't be that bad. I want to go watch it. Rings of Power had the same
Again,
thing.
like the old
Writing
adage, right? There's no such thing as bad PR, right?
writing is not good for either the Rings of Power or
Yes, well, Rings of Power will
Star
be
Wars.
next episode. I have a
It's just not there.
but the Acolyte, I will say, some of the actors in it were decent. Some of the scenes were decent, but then it's followed up with garbage, and so it's
Now, when you say garbage, is it just filler? Because that's what I find that they've done a lot lately. There's been way too much filler, just fluff
it's
in the episodes of. a lot of recent
They're taking
production.
something that could be an hour and a half movie, and they're breaking it. I forget how many episodes there were,
Probably
seven,
8, I
6 or 7,
think.
and they're doing that into 30-40 minute
So it's
episodes.
like
When
time wasting.
but it's that, but it's just bad dialogue, bad, like, taking 50 years of established Star Wars, 45 years, whatever, established Star Wars canon, and saying the Force is female. Now we have lesbian space witches that are going to, bring about the Force into these kids just by this magic. And then by the end of it, you find out that it's probably this other sort of shady, maybe Darth Plagueis kind of character who's working from the shadows. But in between that, you've got pronoun use, you've got, very effeminate male Jedi characters. And they take, and in the first episode, the person they ran with a lot of the marketing, Carrie Ann Moss, she gets
Killed.
stabbed
Yeah,
by a
yeah,
knife
and
and
dies.
killed. She's a Jedi. That's right from the get go. It was just
You can't help but wonder because maybe I'm wrong, but I think a lot of men our age probably really um, gravitated towards somebody like Carrie Ann Moss, not Moss,
Moss.
Moss. Um, Maybe because of the Matrix, I suppose.
That would be a big part of it. She was
Probably
fantastic.
because she played a great part and she wasn't hard to look at either. So
Mhm.
that
But
played towards the opposite of what the current Star Wars agenda appears to be, right? So when you have that character and that actress in that role all of a sudden off, it kind of is a kick to the individuals that may have actually appreciated her
Well,
in that
it's the
character.
fact that their marketing featured her heavily, as
yeah,
implying that she was going to be
Well,
the
that's the
star of
bait
the
and switch
series.
that they've been known
Yes,
for
the
the
bait and
last,
switch.
what, 15 years.
it also says something about the narrative of men don't like strong female characters.
No, we
That is,
just
that
like
is false.
Men,
well
men,
written stories.
men hate badly written male characters, and we hate badly written female characters. It doesn't matter, or child characters. It doesn't matter.
Do you
I mean,
know, you mentioned a very feminized male character, which I know, again, I haven't watched the series and I've seen just a few clips. Um, but if you look at a lot of the old anime out there, a lot of the male characters in a lot of the old anime, or Japanimation we used to call it,
mhm.
were highly feminized in their appearance, even though they were drawn characters and not real people, right? Um, and I don't know if that's an influence coming over
No,
from there. I don't
no,
think so
it's
in
what
that case, but
Now, Ryan, you mentioned it a while ago about what the term was for dudes like Timothy Chalamet, and is it rat?
Oh, I don't
You and I were
remember
talking about this a
now.
while ago, but it's these sort of, men who are not the traditional
Well, you
strong male
yes,
character
you went away
who,
from
and I have nothing against Timothy Chalamet. I thought he was great in Dune, but it's
your
just,
macho action stars to a, we'll say, a safer,
mhm,
uh,
more effeminate.
less
Yeah,
masculine
yeah,
aesthetic almost.
aesthetic. Yeah,
yeah.
they're slimmer, um, the
Yeah,
less
fine
muscle
features.
mass, very fine features, often very young looking. But
And and
they're just
and
not.
characters who are, like, one thing about Carrie Ann Moss from the show. Again, she was only in it a few minutes. Was she wasn't dressed scantily. She was wearing Jedi robes. She was not there as eye candy. She was there as star power and what we hoped would be a good performance. Instead, we got the opposite from the fact that she dies in the first fucking 5 seconds. But some of the male characters in the show were very. They were there and some of the marketing that I saw afterwards coming from some of the Disney shrills on Facebook was, oh, the hot Jedi. Oh, I'm on board for the hot Jedi. The guy's wearing flowing robes. You can't see him. What does it matter if he's hot or not? Like,
Well, he did
it's
strip down in the one scene.
no. That was the bad guy.
Yes,
But no, the male Jedi, one of the male Jedi's, he had dreadlocks, or I
I
forget
don't
what
know.
the hairstyle's called.
But that's also the double standard that we're constantly seeing too, because you can't say that kind of thing as a man. anymore.
No.
If it, you know, you can't. But it's okay for women to say that about a man. You can't say that as a man about a woman on screen anymore.
No. And
Um,
Well,
not without getting ridiculed or
they've very
accused
much
of
done
being.
that too. They've desexualized women and sexualized men,
Yeah, so it's 180. So it's no better. They're exactly the
which
same.
and
whatever.
one of
I
the
don't care. Sexualize men all you want. It doesn't matter to me.
No,
I've
that's
never
right.
had an issue with it.
I forget what there was the guy. He's a conservative guy. I forget his name, but they're talking
It's
about
hypocritical, is what it is.
well, but so the woman was talking to the guy. It's on social media. I'm sure you've seen it, where he's talking about would you be offended if somebody called you a name? And he gives this little riddle of roses are red, violets are blue, something in it. But you always find something to offend a feminist. In other words, guys, go ahead. You want to call me a whatever? That's fine. I don't care. It's not going to bother me. It's you want to.
What disappoints me is there. When we grew up, we had pop culture. We had heroes and villains, each on their own separate journeys. Today's young people have none of their own pop culture. It's all reboots and sequels to the
Mhm.
stuff we had when we were kids. And
But twisted to a degree.
no hero has an arc. They are right out of the gate as good as they need to be. They don't need to improve on anything. They do not make mistakes, which means they don't learn anything.
Right.
That is a boring character.
Yeah, it is a boring character.
It's
Yeah.
a horrible character. You can't relate to that character because
Now,
nobody's like him.
if it was real life and not a story that you're trying to tell, and you were that character, and you were naturally good at whatever it is you're doing, life would be great. But that's not what this is. This is a story. These are stories that these writers are supposedly trying to tell to an audience. And you're right, it's boring. It's boring when there's no sense of risk. And it's funny too about the whole sexualized male. Like when we grew up, take a movie like probably the best actor that I could think of would be likely Jean-Claude Van Damme.
That's the
Because
best actor you can
no,
think of.
in the scenario that I'm about to present anyway.
Okay.
Okay, so in a lot of his movies, because of what it was, right? There were a lot of action movies. It was
Yeah.
martial arts, right? So whether it was Universal Soldier or Bloodsport's probably a, a good example. He's a male actor, physically fit, um, often shirtless in the movies because that was the movie, right? He was a fighter in a ring, right?
Well, that was very much an '80s thing, right? '80s
Right.
action
But who
stars.
was the audience watching it most of the time? It wasn't women googling over his bare chest in the movies. It was guys like us who were like, yeah, I wish I could do half of what he was doing on screen.
There,
Right?
there's
It
yeah,
wasn't. It
and,
wasn't
and
even a thing.
and there's a connection there to metal music in the sense that it was very macho in the 80s, right? One of the bands that guys wanted to be, or one of the artists was Rob Halford from Judas Priest. Back in the early 80s, that they were the shit. He was dressed up, in like, you know, gay leather and studs and stuff like that with handcuffs and whatnot, right out of the club scene. Like if there's a book about it, and guys are in the front row just like, I want to be Rob Halford. He's getting all the
Because
chicks, and in reality,
yeah,
he's as gay as the day is
yeah.
long.
Like it's just
And it's and
it's so
you
twisted now.
yeah, and it's and but we didn't care. I don't remember ever, you know, listening to Judas Priest thinking about, oh man, I wish I was gay like Rob Halford. His his background and his story meant nothing.
No,
It
because
was
it was the persona
yeah,
that
Yeah.
that you were
yeah,
seeing, right? Not the individual.
and it's the yeah, like the action movies, like Schwarzenegger and Predator. The first scene where he gives Dutch, or no, he's Dutch. Who's
Yeah.
Carl Weathers play?
It's
What's the character's name? Anyway, they give that handshake, and it's just
Oh, yeah.
rippling
Yeah.
bicep for
yes.
a good 5 seconds, and it's just
And it's not. It's obviously playing up the idea of macho men and the strength and
yeah,
the power in the muscle and the popping veins, but
Well,
it's
then
not. It wasn't done for women.
No,
benefit. It was
then you were allowed to compete with each other,
right, and
right?
men
There
weren't
was no
watching
issue
that
with that.
movie because they were attracted to other men or anything like that. It
They
wasn't a sex symbol at all. It was just,
If
it
you
anything,
was
know,
something to aspire to.
right,
yeah,
exactly.
if anything, there were there was a kid, teenage guy watching that who said, "I want to go lift weights to look like that."
Yes, exactly.
And if that's the worst thing that came out of that movie, then
No
great.
different than
Well, I
kids
mean, Arnold
watching
Schwarzenegger
the
almost
He-Man
built
cartoons. Same thing.
Yeah.
Mr. Like weightlifting, powerlifting,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Mr.
He was
Olympia.
definitely an advocate for health. Probably I probably
Just
as
like
I pat my
Van
stomach should have
Damme,
listened to him.
uh, I'm sure inspired a ton of people to do kickboxing
Yeah.
because that was his thing.
Yeah. I think the
But as far as the best actor to come out of the '80s, no, I would
No,
disagree with you.
that was
He was an all
was
right
ill.
action guy
It was totally intended in context, not as a
meanwhile
general
in the
statement.
background, Mark's just replaying that dancing scene he does with
in
those
every
two
movie. I
girls, and
think
yeah,
it's
yeah, just that. But then again, you've got a period in the 80s and 90s with Van Damme where being French was not cool at all. And here's you got this French guy with an obvious French accent just kicking the shit out of everybody in every movie. So it was interesting.
I really do think we came on the tail end and through the golden era of film.
I would I would agree. Be-
Like everything
Tail end, yeah.
was
Yeah.
like the '70s and stuff. Everything was kind of ramping up.
well, they couldn't fall back on CGI. They couldn't fall back on green screen. Well, they still had green screens, but they couldn't fall back on all of the computer editing that they do now. Like there's so little of it nowadays that isn't touched by an editor in front of a computer. I don't know if you could say any of it is anymore,
When you look at what
but it was all
But
sets and film,
when you look at what George Lucas did with those first
authentic.
three Star Wars movies, where they're being really held by a hand in a black glove kind of thing, and you look at start the first three Star Wars films, not the re-releases, the originals, and then you compare that to even Alien Romulus that we saw today. That movie had a
We haven't talked about. We should
that
talk
movie
about.
well, that movie had an 80s vibe.
It
It
did,
had
That's
a,
what I've heard. Yeah.
everything looked like it did in the first Alien movie.
So
It was
dark and gritty and
very much so.
yeah.
text like the
Well,
cameras looked.
real sets as opposed to CGI
Yeah.
soundstage.
And I don't know. I mean, I'm sure a lot of it was
I'm
CGI,
sure
but
it was,
it
but they
looked,
maybe they're starting to learn, and they're not.
You need to blend it.
yeah,
Yes, it's getting blended better. Yeah, that's a good word.
yeah. But I mean, if someone asked me what my favorite, what my favorite movies were that would have like sci-fi based, it's the original three Star Wars because it looks so real. Everything was real.
Well, it's because it was real,
Yeah, oh,
right?
yeah. So I
Like
mean, but it,
filming real things,
yeah, and it made
models,
you,
but still.
yeah,
Sci-fi based, 1982 is the thing, 100%.
okay. I
Just
would,
for the practical effects.
okay.
I'm a creature feature guy, so
Yeah, okay.
and
I
Alien.
would not.
Alien was up there.
I would not have gone sci-fi with the thing. I would just say horror because that could have easily been something from a different dimension.
I couldn't stand
No,
the
it's
thing.
totally sci-fi.
Well,
I was not prepared for the thing.
oh, as an under 10-year-old boy watching the thing for the first time, that was and okay. So my stepfather had rented a movie with Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell in it, like a comedy, like a romantic comedy. We watched it. I thought, okay, next movie was The Thing. Wow, that was what a juxtaposition that was.
What really messed me up about the thing is my cousins had a husky,
Yeah, the scene with the dog.
and we watched
Oh,
it,
I did
and
not enjoy that. I think I
I
made it that far in the movie.
never
Enjoy the
really
dog.
looked at the dog the same way
Yeah,
again. It was, yeah, I
well,
would have been probably 12, 13-ish when I
yeah.
saw it.
I couldn't finish that movie after that.
well, you and I were talking today about Event Horizon and about
That was a great movie.
how certain scenes stick with you.
Yeah,
This where they're watching the footage they find on the ship. There's the one scene with the guy like ripping the other guy's like face open and
Yeah.
so that has stuck with me my whole life. Just how real that looked. Because when did that come out? Like early '90s, mid '90s.
yeah. Would almost rewatch that actually because I've forgotten about Event Horizon.
I rewatched it the other day because somebody at work was talking about horror movies. We were talking about like um, Saw and is it Terrorizer with the clown? Of course, you know
I
how
didn't
much I love
watch
clowns.
any of the Saw
I
movies.
think
It just
so.
didn't.
But they were talking about that as horror, and I said, no. Take the rest of the day off and go home and watch Event Horizon, because that's horror, that's psychological, that will stick with you, as opposed to somebody just getting sawed open
Yeah,
by something.
I don't draw towards the slasher films or just the gore for the sake of gore films. I
I
like the
did when they were well, good.
yeah
But there's a
Friday the
comedic
13th, Halloween,
yeah.
but there's a comedic twist to those films,
Child's
at least
Play.
at least for me.
Well, they
Like,
aren't
it's
trying to be anything other than what
how
they
ridiculous they
are.
are.
Yeah. Oh yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
And I will say the first Nightmare on Elm Street with Johnny Depp wasn't, but then it's the sequels made it more ridiculous. But
The part where she's being drugged down the school hallway in the shower curtain
yes,
really got to me when I
I
was
can
a
see
kid.
that. Do you remember the movie The Brotherhood,
Brotherhood.
where it's the kids LARPing in the high school, and you didn't see
I
that, you
don't
weren't?
think so. I don't
Sounds
think I've seen
familiar.
that one.
But I think there was another movie called The Brotherhood in Netflix recently. Well, I say
Maybe,
recent.
but this is something, because Rich showed us this movie about 20 years ago, and it's just these. It's the worst. The entire soundtrack in the background is just this heart beating, like the.
Oh, I think I know what one you're talking
And then there's this unnecessary, like,
Yes, I
3 minute
think I.
shower scene of this
Yeah.
guy in his underwear just twirling in the high school shower. And even my wife turned to me and said, what the hell is this? Like, this has nothing to do with anything. But it was just, but that kind of, but that was that's those are horror slasher movies for me. But Wrong Turn, the first Wrong Turn was
That was
interesting,
quite good.
because I mean there are some
I
roads
can't even
around
say if
here,
I've seen that one.
but
Every
like the
now and then, you find a good one decent film in the genre.
yeah, yeah, like Wrong Turn, that there are some interesting roads north of here that you can take a left or right turn, and all of a sudden you're on a road that it's not really even on the GPS, and there's a couple of old houses, and there's a guy looking at you from the front porch,
Yeah,
looking a little
we
rough.
drove through them when we were looking for abandoned places not long ago.
Yeah, yeah, that'll be
Flip that.
that'll that'll be a good live podcast, because I still have the route for the one that goes up near Barrie, and there's some really good, apparently, houses up there. But anyway, but yeah, I would agree with you. We were fortunate enough to be in movies when movies were special, and as opposed to political, or no, political is the wrong word, social justice of some kind.
That and they weren't so formulaic.
Yeah, I would
Uh,
agree.
Directors weren't afraid to take a risk on
Right,
the
and
movie,
experiment.
but then the movie didn't cost $300 to $400 million either.
You know, I would be willing to bet that movies don't actually need to cost that now.
They do,
They don't.
Like,
Godzilla
there's
minus
no
one.
reason that they should cost that much, other than all they're doing is attempting to predict how much they're going to make from the movie if it does as well as they think, and then they're basing their budgets on that. But I would almost wonder if sometimes those numbers you hear are completely fictitious. You know, they'll say for example, we create a movie and then we tell everybody, oh, we did it for $10 million, completely signed, sealed, delivered $10 million. That's all we spend on it, and nobody watches it because we only spent $10 million on it. They expect it to completely suck. If we take the exact same movie and we tell everybody we spent $300 million on it instead, all of a sudden you got all kinds of people going to the movie to see it because they assume that with that kind of a budget, it's got to be good,
I would agree with
right?
that, except for
So
one
I
word:
don't know that those budget
Waterworld.
numbers are accurate. What's that?
I would agree with that, except for one word, and that's Waterworld. Waterworld was, at the time, was the most expensive movie ever made, if I'm not mistaken,
Well, I can understand
and
why
it
at the time.
bombed. It bombed. I thought it was all right.
I didn't
It,
mind Water.
but that's it. It's just an all right movie. It's not
Yeah.
a
I,
great movie. It's
I saw it.
entertaining.
I saw it because of Kevin Costner. I love Kevin Costner, and so I went to see it because of that. And what really got me was when the old man's looking at the little girl's tattoo. All it does is just point to the top of a globe. And somebody analyzed this years later, but there's a couple of different languages around it that none of it makes sense. And so the guy just goes, dry land is that way. No compass, no idea where it is, no point on the horizon of reference except for water. He'd have no clue what any of that meant. That drove me nuts in that film. And how they're somehow able to
You're
refine it.
not supposed to pay
Well,
attention
except
to
for
details.
you know your
Well,
your
I'm an
sun
analyzer by heart, and so
your
that's
sun rising and setting should give you half an idea which way's which.
maybe, but yeah, okay. But in a world where there's no dry land, it makes no difference
It
where the
would
sun
depend on
rises or
where in the
sets, because there's
hemisphere
no
you
there's
were.
no crops to worry about. The water's not going to get hot
No,
or cold.
no.
So I don't know. That would, but to your point, I think the movie, those numbers, I think they have to report how much certain things cost, and then usually it leaks, right?
I don't know. I'm doubtful that it's accurate.
I would say that, but if you're talking about marketing, like the worldwide marketing
Like
for
if
stuff
it's
like that, it
to the
would, it,
nearest million, I would consider accurate, but I don't think that they're accurate. The world is too much about perception nowadays, and it's like brand names, startups that are instantly the most expensive thing of its kind on available, with the intention of the price leading the consumer to believe that it's high quality because it's expensive. Doesn't mean it is. Just means it's expensive,
Mhm.
right? Because the perception is there that things of high quality cost more.
Well, I think
And
Disney's proven that that's not true.
what's that?
Disney's proven that that is
Well,
100% not true.
yeah. Well, Disney's its own.
Because at least the line that we're given anyway is that when the Marvels was coming out with the most recent terrible movie, they really tried to run away from how much that actually cost, and the rumors was it was a lot more by the marketing budget because they put boatloads of money into marketing, but they had, because it was delayed and delayed and delayed.
They knew how bad it was going to be.
Yeah, and if
Well,
So
it's
they
because they
didn't want to look even worse by
tried to shoehorn a character in Endgame that nobody asked for and nobody wanted with
spend
an actor
500 million or
who's
whatever it
not
was
particularly
to
likable.
do a movie that you only made 300 million on, or if that. I don't know what the numbers were, but
but I look at Godzilla minus one, and Godzilla minus one it had a good background story, it had
I couldn't
believable
watch it.
actors. Why?
I just there
You
was
didn't
a
like
time
Godzilla?
I didn't say it's not that. I can't do subtitles
Oh,
and dubs anymore. I don't know what it is. I used to not have an issue with
this
subtitles
the subtitles and listening to, I don't know where they got these actors. I don't know if they're popular in Japan or if they're just sort of no-name actors. There was emotion in the performances. It wasn't like,
on the dubs.
no, on the authentic ones, like for the subtitles, like there were like where you can hear them speaking in Japanese and you can hear the emotion. I don't speak Japanese obviously, but the enunciation and the emotion and the performance.
Yeah, I don't
It,
know what it is. I used to be able to do. I always preferred subtitles uh, to dubbed audio, but
Depends on the movie.
because nothing drives me crazy more when watching any film if the mouth movements don't match the sound. It drives me insane. I don't know, but maybe I'm one of those individuals that listens visually. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Where you hear better because you're able to see the mouth movements. When it doesn't correlate, it drives me insane.
But I think big screen
I
TV.
can't do it.
But I've heard that from a lot of people, and I think that big screen TVs is what killed subtitles for a lot of people. Because
Maybe.
if you picture 20 years ago watching, say, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which is one of my favorite movies, you didn't have a TV that was 40 inches or more when that came out. You were watching it on a 32-inch screen from 15 feet away. The subtitle and the person were in the
Same field of
same
vision.
same distance, same aspect. But you watch it on a 55 plus, you actually have to lower your eyes and
Yeah,
read along.
and
I
maybe
think,
that's what it was. Like when I watched Pan's Labyrinth, that's subtitles,
yeah,
and I loved
Very good movie.
yeah.
I loved it. It was original for one,
Mm. Well, it's Del
and
Toro. Yeah, everything
what's that?
is Guillermo del
Yeah.
Toro. Right.
Yeah,
Everything that he does is very out there and neat.
yeah, and the subtitles didn't bother me at all. Um, but I couldn't watch
I didn't
Godzilla
care
minus
for
one.
the which one was it? Shape of Water. The one that was odd,
But at least it was unique, right? I mean, it wasn't.
strange.
But it was an
That
odd.
was another Del Toro.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it was.
I mean the
His
creature was fantastic. But
that series he did, was it Box of
Cabinet of Curiosity,
Cabinet of Curiosity?
Mhm.
very good.
I really enjoyed that series. I wish they'd do another one, but
I had a problem with the episode with the guy in the casket with the rats, the tunnels with the rats,
that was
and
very claustrophobic inducing.
yeah,
Yeah,
like
I
I
enjoyed
I'm
it
I'm a
actually, but
I'm a big guy, and I hate
yeah,
Yeah,
And I
but
think that was practical effects.
I think it would.
I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure
yeah.
the rat, the big
Alien
one.
Romulus only reportedly cost 80 million.
I can see there wasn't much to it, right? I mean, it was, and sort of, and as I was sitting there, I was going to come back to your thing about perspective, about you know sides of gray, and I tried to explain this to my son the other day. Was the aliens aren't really the bad guy? They're a species trying to procreate and survive. That's all they're doing. They're
Yeah,
not
once again,
terrorizing
it's
for
the
fun.
humans that are where they shouldn't be.
But you know what I mean? Like, but it's not like a slasher where they're doing it for fun, or they're doing it out of for they get off on it. All they're trying to do is lay their eggs
They're
and
just
stop people from destroying the eggs. That's what
essentially
birds do.
an animal.
Uh, Yeah. And so that for me it's but the horror though is just the humans are being hunted, which is
You're saying it's more like a wildlife documentary than it is anything else.
yeah. Wait, at its root, that's what it is. Humans go to strange planets, see strange animal, and try to kill it. Animal fights back. That's
Well,
Alien.
it depends on which one you're watching, but yeah, it's essentially like what happened to the crocodile. Or the what's his name?
Oh, Steve Irwin.
Steve Irwin. Yeah, he
Yeah,
went poking stuff that he shouldn't have been poking, and
Got poked back.
it bit him back.
Yeah,
the
literally.
South Park episode. I mean, I as a guy, his conservationist attitude
Oh,
of
yeah,
great, he is something that people should aspire to be, except for the touching of the animal stuff. Like, and when South Park did the thing about, oh, there's a crocodile, I'm gonna run over there and shove me thumb up its
yeah.
ass. Oh, he's going crazy now.
But every show you see or saw that guy was, oh, there's a snake, and he picks it up. Look at how angry it is. And he
It's
puts
like,
it
yeah,
down. Yes,
maybe
because
you shouldn't touch it then.
you just manhandled the snake.
But see,
Yeah.
that might work in Australia. That wouldn't work in Canada. Can you imagine going up and, oh, there's a bull moose. Let's go. Let's see if we can wrangle it down to the ground. Or there's or a wolverine or a grizzly bear. Can you imagine that?
Well, that's true. I don't think there's too many animals in Australia that would be considered significantly larger than humans.
No, but everything's poisonous and
Kangaroos are
wants to
bigger,
kill you.
but you're right. They're small and they're poisonous and fast,
Yeah, and I think crocodiles and saltwater
or
crocodiles would be
venomous. I guess I
yeah.
should say, not
But
poisonous.
in in Canada and the States, I mean, you have bison that are as heavy as cars. I mean, nothing like that in Australia. Like nothing native. I don't think anyway. I think they brought over cattle that are pretty big now. But that's why when Cook
Domesticated for food, so
well, when Captain Cook lands in New Zealand back in the late 1700s, early 1800s, and he sees that there are no large animals, there's no all these little flightless birds walking around because they have no predators there, and then the cats get off the ship and decimate. I forget the number. Some huge percentage of the native bird population in New Zealand is completely gone and can never be returned because they were all killed by cats. The guy had no predators. That would suck. And Newfoundland, when you go across on the ferry and you come back, they check you for. They ask you a question about like, are you taking any soil? Do you have any plants? Do you have any? Are you bringing any small animals? That kind of thing, because they want to know what you're bringing into Newfoundland,
mm.
because it's its
On the
own
way
little
in, not necessarily on the way out.
both.
Oh, both, eh?
Yeah, yeah. And it was pretty interesting that and
Well, a lot of Newfoundland and Labrador are preserved, right?
yeah,
There's like a huge amount of it that's protected.
because there's nothing.
Not all.
I think there were a few reserves there. A lot
Thanks.
more. I think there were a lot more reserves in New Brunswick that I saw that because a lot of casinos there. I don't remember seeing any in Newfoundland. At least none that they were advertised for.
Well, they may not be necessarily populated though either, but I don't know. I thought there was a lot. Maybe I could be wrong.
So today I saw a single goose flying off in a random direction. I got to thinking, how does that guy know where to go? Like his usually they're in a flock, right? How do they know where to go? Like, let's say one slept in, and
GPS. That's how I know where to go. GPS.
very very possible. If so, we need to get these geese and figure out how they've had this technology for thousands of years. You know what I mean? Like or a monarch
Google
butterfly.
Maps.
Monarch butterfly will fly from here to the same place in
Yeah,
Mexico and back. How the hell does it know where to
Yeah, it's
go?
pretty amazing. Yeah.
It's especially when you're at the mercy of the slightest breeze.
See, the Monarch, I found old science fiction movie, and I've been trying to find it. I cannot remember the name of it. An alien movie, but the aliens had genetic memory.
Hmm.
So whatever its parent went through, the young would know that they had the same genetic
Hmm.
memory, and then whatever the young went through, that one growing up would build upon it. So I don't know, maybe butterfly has some form of a genetic memory in which,
Do you
because they only live season to season. They
Yeah.
don't. It's not like they're long-lived creatures.
could you fathom how rapidly the human race would progress if we had a genetic memory, so that you have all of the memories of your ancestors
Hmm.
as it goes? Like, because it would be compounded, right? From the beginning of time. We'd all be able to recount our entire family history and family tree for the most part, you know,
Well, that's
and then experiences, knowledge.
But is that why some people are more interested in their families than others, right? Like I have an innate connection to my predecessors because I've something drove me to find out more information about certain things. Like when Mel and I went to Scotland the first time, we climbed this mountain in this village where my family had been for hundreds of years. Went through the brush and we found this cairn, and I have pictures of it. And turns out that cairn overlooks the castle my family was in. Something drove us to this point. You couldn't see it from anywhere else. Like we had no idea it was there. And in this little place we found, it overlooked the castle. It surveyed the whole valley. But something like if we had walked 2 feet to the left and kept on going straight, we would have passed it completely. It went straight to this thing. It was very eerie. So maybe there is some sort of residual genetic memory of things that go with us. Because it's the only thing I can think. Like animals must have it. Like how do?
Well, I mean, we would refer to it as instinct, right?
Hmm,
which was
But
long since lost.
well, humans
We don't know.
have, I think.
I think some of us have. I think we have bouts of.
Well, you know what we would call it? We would call it common sense, but it's
Mm,
different for everybody, right?
yeah,
In a roundabout way, because there's certain things you just know, or intuition, for example, might be another example of a human instinct, right? We just don't
I was
use it the
amazed.
same way as an animal would.
I was amazed when I was in college. We had a class. I forget what it was. Electrical engineering. One of the courses. I think it was AC motors, and we were talking about how magnetic north and things like that. And the teacher said, "Quick, what way is north?" And we're sitting in one of the classrooms, and north.
Up.
One of the we're sitting in one of the classrooms that our backs were to north, like our backs were to Portsmouth. And I just went like this. And like one other person had the slightest inkling which direction north was. And people were asking us how we knew where north was. It's like you don't know just generically, approximately where you are in the world. And kids had no clue.
Portsmouth Village?
Like
Because from
like
St. Lawrence, Portsmouth Village isn't north. It's south.
no, but Portsmouth, the road
Oh, gotcha. Yeah,
runs
yeah, 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 yeah.
on the one angle, right? So you can know that you're like whether it's northeast or northwest, but you're pointing in the general direction.
Yeah.
But people had no clue. They had no idea.
There's a tribe. Shit, where is it? I watched a TED talk on it. The woman said that they don't they only orient themselves by north, south, east, and west.
Hmm.
They do not use even their they have no right, left. It's so if you're sitting there, it would be I need you to move your south southwest foot north,
Fascinating.
and that's
Hmm.
how they speak. And they are incredibly good at orienting themselves because they speak in direction. So
Wow.
depending
I have
on
to look
which
that
way
up.
you're moving, your limbs would change right? Based on the direction that you're
Sort of like port and
orienting.
starboard on a
It's
boat.
very
Yeah.
interesting.
Interesting.
Which is weird. It almost makes you think of someone who's looking at their physical space from like a top-down perspective, when you think about it, as if
Mhm.
you were taking your air that the space that you inhabit and you're somehow mentally superimposing a map over top of it and you're looking down to be able to accurately use direction for identification of placement of objects in the world,
It's very interesting.
yourself included.
I'm trying to
Never heard
think
of
of
that
how that
before.
would work.
Okay.
How that would work, like how you would teach a child that, right? How you would teach a child just to have an innate understanding of direction and to, because if left and right are meaningless theoretically, it'd be a level of understanding
They
that.
would either it would be like the was it the Harfoots in the new Rings
Oh,
of Power. You either understand or you're left behind.
that's a great
But
point.
if you had
Yeah.
a very, very sensitive, um,
You would just learn it innately. If that's all that
yeah,
you
I
ever
think
see
you,
and
you
Mhm.
everybody acts, that's all you
you unerringly always simply knew northeast, southwest, wherever you were, then sure, you could use that.
know.
You know,
I just think it would be interesting to relate that in conversation to someone who's standing, like
well,
to
it'd
be
be
in a
really
group of people.
confusing, I think, if you were to,
Oh
yeah,
yeah, because you, eh, wow, just
For us,
fascinating.
it would be, but if
yeah.
it would
Yeah,
be as confusing to them for us to use rights and left.
yeah, that's interesting. Because you have to assume that I mean, tribal hunters would of all different sort of stripes would have to sort of innately know where north was all the time because they'd have to know where to go to get animals and
And
things
then
like that.
back.
But
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Was
fascinating.
this a tribe that lived out in plain?
No, I'm pretty sure it was like an Amazon type
Oh,
situation. I'd
because I
have to
could
watch
see it in
the.
the plain, right? But there's not a lot of landscape,
Mhm.
not a lot of features. You're more accustomed to
I
direction.
think it was quite a while ago that I watched it.
Yeah, there are a lot of those tribes that are. I still laugh to this day about the one tribe though, where the Christian missionary tried to go, like the tribe that's the islands off India. The Christian missionary tries to get somebody to take him out there, and they warn him that they'll kill him. He says, "No, I'm going to go out."
Well, he
Goes to
he
shore.
went more than once.
Yeah, he goes ashore. They chase him off. He goes back. I mean, like the government specifically says, we want these people to remain as they are. We don't want anyone on the island. Like that's something that I always argue with religious people is the fact that, do you think it's just strange that people who have no contact with Western civilization have no idea what Christianity is? Do you think that's
Or
just an
care.
accident, or care, or even have developed a deity similar?
Yeah.
And it goes back to that old Ricky Gervais said. I forget who the original person who says it was. That you take all the holy books in the world today, burn them. In 1,000 years, none of those books will come back exactly as the way they were. They will all be different, slightly different, because the story is organic. It's not like you've watched the South Park episode where they actually delve into why Joseph, but the Mormon
Yes.
religion, which have you seen that?
Doesn't sound familiar.
So the guy Joseph, this is really high level. So the Joseph Smith, the guy who started Mormonism, he was a little bit of a nut, but he was also quite smart and he knew to take advantage of people. So he comes into town. And he says, "I just found a new testament of Jesus Christ out in the forest. Yeah, I have to wear this special thing in order to, and it's in a hole, and I look in the bucket, and it's there, and no one else can see it. So half the people are like, wow. The other half are, that doesn't make any fucking sense. So he finds this guy to transcribe it, and he transcribes it, everything he's saying, and then by accident or on purpose, all of a sudden all the notes disappear. And he goes back to Joseph Smith a day later, whatever, and says, "I'm so sorry. They've disappeared, or I burned them in a fire, whatever it was. If we can go back to the plates and you can tell me, I'll write them down again." Joseph Smith says, "Oh well, it sucks because he told me that they would disappear after we transcribe them. So I'll look again and we'll see. They might be slightly different." Okay, sure, no problem. So they write it down, and it's different from what he said the first time. And apparently this happened twice. and this guy still went along with the
Because
story,
he was just making it up all the
making it up as he went along. And coincidentally, in there somewhere was the fact that that grown men are allowed to have young wives, as many young wives as they want. That was one of the inclusions of this the story. And so that's how these things, which is why you have so many different interpretations of the Bible and the Quran and the Torah. It's not original. It's always edited.
Mind you, though, if that being said, you can't help but wonder if there is a common denominator somewhere in there, right? Where the different stories start to diverge, what let's assume that they were all based on some type of, I'm not going to say fact, some uh, shared narrative.
The shared narrative. I've read a lot of these things in my life. The shared narratives that I can come up with, there are two or three of them. A way to control children to stop them from being bad. Don't do this or you're going to go to hell, or don't do this or the creator's going to
Which
punish
makes
you,
it
that
an
kind of
old
thing.
wives' tale.
And like Santa
Yeah.
Claus. Two, it's a way for people to control other people, and it's usually only women. Like the major religions in the world, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, they don't let women do anything, you know. And we're smart in theory, but in practice, I mean, it's, you know, basically what these religions are trying to tell people is half the population are lesser beings than the other half of the population. We can't let them ever preach. We can't let them ever be in positions of power. And all the books tell them about, honor thy father, honor thy this, don't, you know, it's telling women not to commit adultery. Those rules don't apply for the men, only the women. Like in the Quran, it's very controlling of women. And we see that evidence all the time on the news with women wearing
Well,
complete
it's
covering.
funny if the term father, which if you were to think of that in the Bible, it would be referring to a deity or God,
Hmm.
right?
Oh yeah, there's a reason for that.
But
Yeah.
maybe it's a literal, right? And at some point, that actually meant the father, as in the father of the household,
Well, that's what they
right?
call a priest.
Right. Yeah. But that's when you're still maybe in its very early stages. That was like a way of controlling a family, or
I would say,
within a community, it was a way of organizing the family, and everything was started with the father. I'm not saying it was right, but that I wonder if
but
somehow the lines got blurred and father wasn't an individual in the household, instead it was a deity,
well, that only really works in monotheistic
because the
religions,
household
like
gets bigger, right?
yeah, like in pantheist situations where you have multiple gods, that doesn't really exist. Like even in the Norse pantheon, Odin is the All Father, but all these other gods represent very important things that Odin doesn't control. And the same thing in Greece. So really, the idea of a male ultimate patriarchal figure that you cannot question, that only exists in the Semitic religions like Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. The other religions they actually, like in Celtic societies where all of our ancestors came from, women had more power than men in a lot of these tribes. In Scotland, in the old days, your family line was dictated by who your mother was, not your father. So and then, but then the Christians didn't like that because then the women held the power, so they got rid of it all. So it's but what I always laugh at is like Moses sees a burning, this guy is alone in the desert supposedly for 40 days or 40 nights, whatever it is, sees a burning bush according to him, and then he's able to go back to this group of people and convince them that that happened. The burning bush spoke to me and gave me these rules. Oh, geez, yeah, we better follow this guy. This guy's smart. Can you imagine that today? Imagine if you were running at the park, and some guy comes up to you and says, "Yes, the bush over there is on fire, and it spoke to me and told me that you have to follow me to this
You
magical
would get
land."
followers. Look at Scientology.
Yeah,
He
Uh,
was a science fiction author,
well, yeah, I know the story. Yeah,
it,
yeah,
it,
and
yeah.
it
he
depends on how
created a cult, the world's biggest cult, aside from.
because it depends on how convincing you can be, right?
But
Look at, hey, they bring it up. Flat earthers, for example, all the people that believe that the world is flat for some
I
ridiculous
thought that
reason.
was common knowledge.
I mean, it's only there because somebody was good at selling the idea.
but I don't believe in flat Earth,
Neither do
caveat,
I.
but I can understand how people can come to that conclusion because they've never seen an alternative with their own eyes.
Suppose, which,
But like,
I
let's say
mean,
you're a
Neither have
there's
guy.
we.
no,
Oh, I know,
We've only
but no, but
seen photos of the rounder.
but
Are they real? Maybe.
I mean, I've been up high enough in a
Can't
plane.
100%. I've never been up. I mean, I've seen the curve.
I've seen the curvature of the Earth, and I know that from scientific experiments
well,
that
maybe
they've
it's
done.
not
Do you
a,
know what I mean?
maybe
Like,
it's not flat though. Maybe it's more like a saucer. That would explain the
But
curvature.
if you're, if
I
you're
guess
gonna
what I
go
mean.
by, I have to see it with my own eyes, then we could all argue that.
No, but I guess what I mean is, but like I can see the leap
Yeah.
there. I can't see the leap of this, like L. Ron Hubbard about the thetans and all that kind of craziness. That's just illogical because there are alternatives to that. There's really, I mean, again, it's like the pictures of the Milky Way. I remember explaining this to my oldest years and years ago. Everything you've ever seen about the Milky Way is wrong because we have no pictures of it because you would have to be in a neighboring galaxy to take the photos of the Milky Way that we come to understand. We have no idea what it actually looks like. It's a
That's
theory.
right. Yeah.
And it was like Pluto up until about 10 years ago,
And the
we
only
had a
reason
general idea. We had no
Yeah.
clue what it looked
the
like.
only reason we can even make that prediction is because we've all done it. Looked at the night sky when it's pitch black. You can see the band,
Hmm.
so it makes you even that alone would give you the impression that our galaxy is like a pinwheel.
Like I've seen Andromeda in a telescope, and it's really small, but you can clearly see what it looks like. And all they're doing is they're extrapolating from those galaxies they can see with the telescope to tell us what the Milky Way
Sure,
looks like. They have no
they,
idea.
they
They have no
really
clue.
don't know exactly, no, and
And
may never.
But they question, and they're constantly asking questions. That's the part that I dislike about any religion. As soon as you start to ask questions,
They shut down.
they shut you down. You have to you have to just it's all faith based. You gotta
oh
believe it.
yeah, and that's why, as I say, I can understand the questioning of the flat earthers. I can understand them saying, "You can't prove this to me, can you?" And then someone will say, "Oh yes, we've done these experiments," and they'll say, "Oh, these experiments are flawed and whatever." But at least the flat earther people, a lot of them on the leading edge, they're willing to put their money where their mouth is, and they'll spend tens of thousands of dollars trying to
No,
prove their
they'll
theory correct.
waste tens of
Well,
thousands of
yeah. Oh,
dollars.
don't get me wrong. Again, I don't think it's true or whatever. I mean,
I think
I've
the
been in a.
easiest way to refute the whole flat Earth thing would be to say, look at a droplet of water in low gravity or zero gravity. What shape is it? If it's still, what shape is it?
But they also
Does
don't
it
really
float?
believe in. But they also don't really believe in gravity.
Well,
They don't believe. They don't believe in solar orbits. So they would say that's just crap.
what if they don't believe in gravity, what holds us to the Earth?
They believe that it's just a flat, that there's nothing else. They believe that the Earth is just this record basically that's on
Oh,
a
okay.
turntable, and that everything else is. And the Norse kind of believed that back in the day, but obviously they didn't have science. But they believed that Midgard was this circle, and that the giants were on the outside of the mountains, which is why you don't go past the mountains because that's where Jotunheim is and the giants. And they thought there was a dome of sky over top of it. That's a very old sort of belief of that. A lot of cultures had that same thing. But I mean, I remember going to Toronto. Who was the astronaut who was there? One of the guys who was on one of the Apollos at the Science Center. This is when we were kids, and he was talking about seeing the Earth and blah 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 blah. And you know, he's actually been to space. I'll take his word for it. And my uncle's a physicist. I'll take his word for it when he tells me the Earth is round. But I can understand why people would not believe it if they can't see it. Same for the same. That's for the same reason I don't believe
I
in
don't.
in religion.
I,